And by the way, even if there wasn't, even if it wasn't there, let's just say we take the First Amendment and we just delete it. And all we have left is we're just people of freedom. I want to understand why, if I was a faith-based person, why I would even be interested. Assuming I'm a libertarian, I may just be some coercive person, I want to impose my views on everybody, now I understand. But if I'm trying to say I'm a person of freedom, I'm trying to say I'm a person of freedom, I respect other people's rights, there's no First Amendment, why on earth would I want to impose my religious views on another person by intertwining the government, thereby forcing my religious views on other people, whether they like it or not, by forcing them to fund it, forcing them to acknowledge it, forcing them to abide by whatever the rules are? Why would I want that as a person of freedom? I'm trying to understand. I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way.
Is this country founded on Christian principles? The answer is yes.
Yes. Yes.
Well, let's just backtrack. A lot of people take issue with that, number one.
Well, you do too.
No, a lot of the founding fathers do, by the way. A lot of the I have a T-shirt with quotes on it from the founding fathers that take issue. But let's just assume.
Okay, if it's not Christian principles, then, Counselor, what is it?
Well, hold on a second. Let's just go. I would say there were freedom principles, but let's just go back and review for a second.
But there.
Wait. I just have a point here. I have a point that I want to make. Let's assume you're right. Let's assume I concede your argument. Can we also agree that this country was founded on slavery as well?
Hear, hear.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Can we agree on that?
No,
No, it's not.
Slavery.
Sorry.
Really? Did you not hear about the 3/5 compromise and what we're going to do with slaves and how we're going to count them in terms of voting and all? This country absolutely, positively permitted every single one of the founding fathers, with the exception of John Adams, to the best of my knowledge, had slaves. Thomas Jefferson had slaves, never freed them to the day he died. So, if I could say back to you, this country was founded by slave owners who permitted, tolerated, advanced, owned, traded, bought and sold other people as slaves. Is that a valid argument for slavery? Women couldn't vote either. Women couldn't vote. People who weren't property owners couldn't vote at the beginning of this country. Does that make it right?
There are some that atheism being a religion which takes more faith than any other religions is being pushed down our throats, though, from the government.
For God's sakes.
It is true.
It does. It takes more faith to believe your grandfather.
Who's pushing it down your throat? Who is pushing it down
Okay,
your
if
throat?
you go to any school, take prayer out of school.
You mean government school, right?
Yeah.
What you mean is, if you go to any government school that is funded by taxpayers, that is put on by the government, run by the government, presented as the government, and there are people there who don't think that that particular government-run school ought to push a particular religion on someone, and the people who are fans of that religion think that that is atheism, cramming atheists down, some and so on. That is such
No,
twisted
evolution is atheism.
Being taught evolution is definitely atheism.
Well, actually,
I thought it was science.
That takes a lot of
Science like gravity.
Nobody has ever observed, measured, or repeated evolution.
But we don't want to get into an
Yeah.
evolution debate, but it might make sense to say, if you're voting, you might not like a class called science, so you could delete a class called science if you didn't like it. But if you are going to have a class called science, you might want to teach what the scientists say is science, right?
No. They should call it the theory, though. They don't even do that. No.
The real science.
They don't even call it a theory. They
Not
say
what
this
they
is how
say
the
is
world
science.
was created.
Science, period.
All right.
Separation of school and
I
state.
think if the test was, I think if the question was, is it possible that Marc Victor is going to get through some presentation, even in a group of mostly libertarians, without engendering some kind of controversial issue? I was worried halfway through that it was going to be too tough. I've succeeded at my mission. By the way, I want to say what I said yesterday at the end of a very heated presentation I had, which is this: shame on those Americans who think that disagreement is necessarily a bad thing. Americans get to disagree. Americans have always disagreed. It used to be the case that Americans could really very strongly disagree about things and still be okay. Somebody started this thing that, oh my God, we disagree, but we can't be friends because we disagree on things. I don't know who started that, but it's like a virus that's infected our American culture. And so Americans should disagree vigorously, We should put our positions out there. We should change our positions if we find better positions and adopt the better positions and move forward. But we should encourage as much disagreement as possible because that's how we advance the dialogue. So if anybody's upset because we had disagreement on things, then maybe they'll rethink that position. And I don't think we had anybody too disagreeable here today, at least not from me.
I want to make a point. I agree that it can be problematic when you've got a theocracy. However, just to put it in perspective, Jesus Christ never forced anybody to accept him.
True.
It was voluntary.
Yes.
And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So I don't think Jesus intended to force people or through a governmental system when clearly his kingdom was not of this world. Now the other point is, let's go back to the concept of what's been termed Judeo-Christian theology. We have the Ten Commandments back in the Old Testament, Jewish history. And in the Ten Commandments, you compare that, there's an equivalency of the Ten Commandments and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution of the United States. And then you've got the counterfeit, which is the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. So in the Ten Commandments are, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. And what have you got in the Fifth Amendment? No life, no liberty, no property taken without due process of law. So I would submit that the Founding Fathers, even the three branches of government, come from the concept in Jeremiah about God is our king, our lawgiver, and administrator. So there are Judeo-Christian principles from the Old Testament and New Testament. But again, Christ never forced anybody to accept him, completely voluntary. So I think that's important. I mean, you can't deny those things are in our Bill of Rights for a reason. Otherwise, if we throw that out, if the end justifies the means, then you can start saying, well, we've got overpopulation, so therefore we can justify aborting babies, and that gets a whole other discourse about choice and whose life is it, but I'm not going to go there. But again, the main point is, Jesus never believed in forced justice. That's a libertarian principle. Would you not agree?
I really don't want to respond to everything you said, but I would be negligent and maybe even grossly negligent if I was not to point out the rather obvious, what I think is huge mistake in what you've said, which is that you're making the argument, I think, that you at least asserted that the 10 Commandments is pretty close or somewhat analogous to the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. And what I would say is simply, if you just simply read both, you would find that there's virtually nothing in common between the two. And there are lots of things in the 10 Commandments which are not illegal, maybe even most, like coveting someone else's property. We might call that capitalism. Things like respecting parents and authority figures and things like that. You don't have to respect anybody, as somebody pointed out, that case giving the finger to the police officer.
You don't have to. Again, it's voluntary.
Yeah.
It's voluntary.
And also there's nothing, by the way, in the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that talks about thou shalt not kill or anything like that. Those are not constitutional protections found anywhere in the first 10 amendments. Those are basically state laws against murder. So it's true that there are lots of things, there are some things in, for example, adultery is in there. Adultery is perfectly legal in Arizona. And so I would say there's virtually no correlation. There are some things that do correlate with our law that are not in the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. However, those things did not originate in the 10 Commandments and existed long before the 10 Commandments in virtually every other society that existed before the 10 Commandments came out. So, and just as maybe just a fun little reference to this, you might want to pull up online George Carlin's little take on the 10 Commandments. He does a little job on them, whittling them down to the things that really matter. And I think he concludes that there's like one or two that actually comport with our laws. So, but, but remember, our laws are just about what should be legal or illegal, what's punished and not punished, and don't deal with, nor should they, I mean sometimes they do, but they shouldn't, morality. I mean, you might say the 10 Commandments lay out a moral position about not engaging in adultery. And the law as it should, does not prohibit that moral issue about engaging in adultery, although it did. Until a few years ago, adultery was a crime in Arizona, and it was not prosecuted by anyone that I'm aware of, and I used to talk to prosecutors about it all the time. They never prosecuted it, and nor should it have been, but it has been deleted off the books, as it should have been, because in my view, morality, the greater scheme of morality isn't the same thing as the law. The law is about what are we going to punish you for? What are you going to go to a cage if you violate?
I thought
So
those were
I would just say
statutes.
I would just say read both things, and they're pretty starkly different.
Let me ask you a question. You often hear the statement, you can't legislate morality. And yet we do have laws that say you can't kill, and if you commit murder, you're going to be punished. So, I mean, that's an argument that a lot of people can get very heated and engaged about it.
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, you can legislate morality, but you can't force people to obey the law.
Yeah.
You can't regulate the individual moral conduct, and this is what the founding fathers believed, was that we should be self-governing. If we have a moral people, they will be self-governing.
Right.
But because we've not had a moral people who have not followed the Ten Commandments, who have rebelled against God's law, that's why we've got a lot of the problems that we're dealing with now. Therefore, you get the war on drugs. Therefore, you get the coyotes smuggling people in. And the New Times had an article that was shocking about I don't know if you read it or not, about when they smuggle, the coyotes smuggle immigrants in, and then they pay $2,000, and then they get held for ransom again, and
Terrible.
the torture and stuff is horrendous. What's going on? So.
Right.
So
Terrible.
I think that,
But to hang that problem on people wanting to come to this country, I think is so grossly unfair. That's the same. That's like hanging the violence surrounding the purchase and sale of marijuana around marijuana. That's like saying the reason we don't want to legalize marijuana is because there are drug cartels that are fighting about who gets to buy and sell. And
no, I don't think you understood what I'm saying. I'm saying that.
I'm agreeing with you, by the way.
Yeah, okay. I'm just saying that even with this enforcement, trying to enforce the immigration and saying, that really shouldn't be an issue, and yet there's still these other problems that are just horrendous.
I would just point out this one little thing, which really shouldn't be ignored, is that I'm sure I could put several Christians who subscribe to exactly the same religious beliefs that you subscribe to on the other side of the table, and they would invoke the same exact religious doctrines that you invoked and come up with a completely opposite conclusion. So,
But what does that mean?
I wish they didn't. I wish
Not
they
really.
didn't, because like when you say, and I think I interpret what you say about, well, Jesus didn't want to force anybody's religion. I think I'm interpreting that correctly to say you believe that church and state should be separate, which is great and terrific. But I'm going to guess that these two over here, who I respect, are Christians and have a different view about imposing their religious views on other people while utilizing the government, and probably derive their views from exactly the same religious doctrines that you do.
Yeah. Well, again, the commandment that Jesus gave was to share the gospel and to share it with love, and the gospel was about love. So a lot of times you get people who call themselves Christians, and yet their behavior doesn't match with that too. So,
Right.
and Jesus said, "Not everybody who calls me Lord, Lord shall enter the kingdom of heaven."
Right, and I would direct you to, if you just wanted a good example of people who use the exact same doctrine and come up with different conclusions, you might want to go to the website, God Hates Fags, and see how they feel.
Well, see, that's totally contrary.
But if you look at their website, they will invoke exactly the same types of religious, and by the way, I think the exact same thing is true with Islam. I was on a plane back from Boston last week, sitting right next to someone I perceived to be a very, very religious Muslim, who I also think was a man of peace, to the best I could tell. And so I think I don't even broad brush people who are of the Islamic faith, because they can read two separate scriptures, or the same scriptures, and get two completely separate conclusions from that scripture as well. So at the end of the day, like I said, I'm interested in people who, for whatever reason, whether it's Jesus told you, or Buddha told you, or Mohammed told you, or you just woke up in the morning and decided this is how you want to live your life, for whatever reason, come to the conclusion that they will not initiate force against other people, you can be my friend.
Right. Okay.